Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. What's going on, Will? Real quick, if someone can just let me know, I believe my mic is good. If anyone can just let me know, maybe mic volume, or if you can't hear me, just give me a quick little mic check. But we should be good. But I gotta say, it was a nice little rally that we had today. Today was a strong rally that we had. I think yesterday we were touching the subject upon, a reversal that we had yesterday. But was there any merit to that reversal that we had yesterday? Was it going to basically be a fluke in which we were going to give up all the gains that we had yesterday? Or were we going to particularly see a follow through? That's exactly what I was hoping was for this follow through that we got today. All right. Randy, what's going on? Randy, Stefan, appreciate the mic check. Appreciate that. Today was definitely a good sign. I think this is what we wanted. I think most of us were kind of getting tired of this little bear market scenario. Obviously, we may not be out of the woods just yet, particularly, but it's a good sign for the start of October. I think that was the biggest sign going into yesterday was it's a new month. We do have earnings pretty much approaching here. I believe we start roughly around the third week of October here. That earnings season is really going to start to kick off. So that's going to be something where I think the market's starting to prep for that. That's we want to see what's going on with those big mega cap tech names, and maybe we actually have a little bit of an earnings run up rather earlier than we anticipated. That's something that could be on the horizon here. Maybe that's why we're seeing the market kind of give us a little bit of a catapult here to the upside rather earlier on. So that's definitely something that I'm just kind of thinking on the back of my mind. But bigger picture, as you see, I actually have the monthly on SPY actually on our live here right now. And the reason why was because that I just wanted to pretty much reiterate being that we actually found support off of the 50 EMA. That was pretty much the biggest thing that I wanted to reiterate to give everyone a little bit of perspective off of the monthly on SPY, sitting at that 361.33 spot. That was pretty much that big key level off of that 50 EMA that we were able to pretty much find support and we were able to find some kind of grounds and we got a reversal. But the bigger factor was that we were able to find a reversal, but we had the follow through today. That was the biggest key for me. And now, as we kind of zoom into the daily here now, we actually see where our current resistance is that's lying right now. We can basically see that red line that's sitting right where our 20 EMA is. And that's why we kind of hovered high and tight for most of the day after we had that little morning impulse up. We had a nice little high and tight consolidation as we literally hover right under that 20 EMA at 378.92. So that's what I'm going to look for tomorrow. Obviously, is of course you want to see if we can actually claim over that 20 EMA and build a base at the very worst case above that 20 EMA. Otherwise, I would not pretty much be surprised that we end up having a strong gap up above that 20 EMA and we continue to rip north as we saw an impulse this morning. Okay. Key levels that I'm pretty much just going to highlight that I'm actually looking for, especially if you're maybe looking for potential swings. You feel like you kind of missed the boat here on this entire impulse up. Ideally, I want to see a little bit of a retest here. I want to see a pullback. I think me and Avery were kind of in the same boat this morning when we saw everything just ripping north. Obviously, you get that factor of you want to chase, or either you feel like you're already late. And that was basically the case. I think me and Avery were kind of in the same sentiment this morning as we're on live, is that we did not want to chase this entire move to the upside as we already saw it just going vertical in front of us. I was able to pretty much capture Microsoft. I think he was able to get in to something else to some degree as well. I think he was calling out Tesla. So that's pretty much just giving you a little bit of an insight on that. But getting back to the levels, I would ideally want to see us retest 375. I think that would be a healthy pullback for SPY. So 375 is going to be one of the key levels I'm watching. Otherwise, if this gets a little bit more steeper, we see maybe a more significant red day tomorrow. I'm going to be watching for 370 half, 370.51 is what I'm watching for on this pullback. And then targets to the upside here off of those support levels would be 382 and then 385 half is what I'm looking for, which would ultimately put us up towards that 50 EMA sitting right around 390 half, 390.57 to be precise. All right. So ideally, of course, I don't want to necessarily chase it. If we do see the gap up over the 20 EMA, it's not my preference to want to chase it here. I do feel like you're already late to the scenario. I think you want to see the pullback, whether it comes tomorrow, maybe in the morning, maybe it be in the afternoon. You want to see that kind of a pullback before you try and dip your toes in rather heavy, especially if you're looking for a swing opportunity. Okay. So that's what I just want to mention about that. Otherwise, the bear case here is that we end up breaking down below that 370 half, and then we go right into what has been, I want to say, what our multi-month bear market scenario that we've had the past few months. Under that 370 half, I think that's when we can start to really talk about that bear case scenario. We'll break under that 366 level, and then we can start to flirt back with our low that we just nearly ended last month here. All right. Thomas, ES is at the top of the megaphone. You are correct. I actually dropped that chart pretty much in our dojo before market close. If I actually, I'll just cross over to ES real quick. If I drop here into the hourly here, we are at the top of the megaphone. And that's where you saw a little bit of a high and tight kind of consolidation here. That was the morning rip. That was a gnarly hourly candle that we got right around that 10 a.m. Eastern time. That was a gnarly candle. But then we had a nice little high and tight consolidation. We held that 37.81 level. And then above that, we went right into my resistance at 3805.50 is what I had as my next resistance level. That puts us right at the top of the megaphone. So, I mean, if I'm kind of going off of ES to give you, I guess, perspective of levels here, I want to see a retrace. We could likely retrace right back down towards that 3760. See if we end up building a base down there. And then ultimately reclaiming 3805 to take out the high today. And then I think that's when we're going to get an overshoot to the upside here. The next leg up, quote unquote, up towards 3857, and then that'll put us into a key level here at that 3880 level is what I'll be watching here for next. All right. But yeah, we are at the top of the megaphone. I think that's more so. It was actually more a little more impressive in terms of hopeful, I want to say is a better term, was that we did not see any kind of midday reversal in terms of how we've seen drastic price action during this entire bear market. No, we were able to actually get a little bit of a dip opportunity, but we more so got a high and tight consolidation, staying more so towards the high of the day and getting an end of the day push. So that was more so the hopeful part. I think that's a really good positive sign for tomorrow, but I'm just ideally looking for a bigger pullback. I would hope that we get a little bit more of a bigger pullback and then give us that second opportunity for the next leg to the upside. All right. Now, I will get into a few names. If you guys have any names that you want to look at, go ahead and just drop the ticker there. I could touch bases on a few different names here. I think I could probably start off with Apple. I believe that was one of the names that I touched bases on yesterday. That was actually one that I was looking for with this entire massive gap fill to the upside. We saw the gnarly move that Microsoft and Apple made yesterday. I also made emphasis about the fact that I wanted to see a follow through on the price action that they had yesterday. That was a positive sign earlier on. We obviously saw the gap up on Tesla. So you're pretty much your three leading indicators in big cap tech were all on the positive sign, all showing relative strength with the broader market. And that was a positive sign to me. So in terms of looking at upside here for continuation of Apple, if we do get that tomorrow, I'm gonna be of course looking for this massive gap fill above 140, above 146.72. I do believe that'll put us towards completion of gap fill at 149.41, right along with your 100 EMA here sitting on the hourly at that 148.89 spot. But ultimately, the level that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is that 150 level. That's roughly right where your downtrend resistance is off of this little hourly descending channel action, if you want to say. And I'm going to be looking at that 150 mark. And that's actually basically right where we particularly broke down last from our making our last leg to the downside of the overall bear market so far. And that was that 150 level dating back towards September 29th. So I'm going to look for the retest at 150 ideally is the bigger target that I'm watching for. But tomorrow's going to be interesting if we can get into the gap fill. I do think that'll set up for the third rally of Apple, the third day of rallying for Apple, and that'll be a beautiful move for tomorrow. Roughly from what 149 from 146 that is 146.72 up until 149. You're looking at about a near $2.5 move. So that'll actually be pretty nice tomorrow. If we can get the dip and rip scenario ideally to play out, that would be a beautiful move to capture. Support I'm watching will be roughly right around 145.77, and then we can make our way up towards testing gap fill, which would set up for a beautiful opportunity to the upside. All right, Marcellus, you want to take a look at Tesla? Let's take a peep at it. Let's see what's going on with Tesla. So big picture here. I think that's probably one of the things that I'll start off with. Actually, let's see if we look at the daily and the weeklies. Let's just see our EMA references, see if there's any bigger key levels that maybe we're not paying attention to. Of course, one of the key levels I can see here right off the bat, off of the weekly time frame here, is that little light blue shade. That's 100 EMA sitting there at that 246.25 spot. We had already had a convincing gap up over that level, but then we saw a nice little tight consolidation as we continued to little. I think we had a little bit of regression earlier on in the morning, but then we saw the beautiful reclaim up towards that 254 mark. So that's something to just keep in mind though, is that 246 level going into tomorrow, 246.25 at the 100 EMA. That'll be one of the key levels that you want to keep in mind, Marcellus, going into tomorrow for a rather support level. Going basically scaling down into the time frames here, looking at the daily. Nothing stands out too much on the daily. You can basically see you have a nice little gap fill here that we've already pretty much breached going up towards that 254.87 mark. Otherwise, nothing here on the daily that pretty much tells us anything else. But I think that bigger picture going back to where I was is likely this hourly time frame. And I think I could probably zoom out just a little bit up to that 2 hour. There we go. So the 2 hour gives you a little bit more of a better image. And what you actually see is a little broadening wedge action that you had. You had the gap down that took you below your trendline support. And then you had the nice little reclaim, the nice little bounce that you had, particularly going into this morning as you retested your prior support as a resistance this morning. You got a little tweezer top action going on, and then you saw the regression that you had going into the afternoon hours. So, particularly going into tomorrow, it's either going to be that you're going to break north of 254, and then you're going to see the further continuation of this morning's price action to get a more bigger move to the entire gap fill that's going up towards 265. Otherwise, downside, I'm looking to basically break down below that 246 mark and then confirm breakdown below 242 will take us to a new low here that we've had for this overall bear market. All right. So 246 breaks, you're watching the downside here towards 242 to confirm, and your first level of support that you're watching is right around this 239 half is what I'm looking at. Otherwise, like I mentioned, you're looking for the convincing break back north above that 254 level, and you're going to look to complete the gap fill at 265. In which case, ideally, just saying risk tolerance wise, and I think maybe this is something that Tom typically does as well, is that if you're going to look to pretty much play the upside and maybe potentially look to play the entire gap fill, if this does break north over that 254, 255 mark, I think ideally you should end up getting a call debit spread and maybe buying yourself some time on that if you're looking to play the bigger and larger move. Otherwise, if you're just looking for the nice little scalp opportunity, look for the break over 254, and then you can play it into the gap fill until you've pretty much feel like you've pretty much hit a top. I would say ideally you're gonna have resistance around 261 half here. So that may end up being your upside potentially tomorrow. It's also gonna depend upon the dip and rip type of scenario. If we can at least hold this 246 level, that'll ideally be buying on support is what I would say. So 246 and then you look for the breakout level at that 254 level. And then you'll see if that ends up being a resistance or not. All right. So that's how I would pretty much look to gauge that going into tomorrow. Another name that I think I can point to as well was Netflix. A little odd this morning in terms of price action for Netflix. As I kind of wanted to point this one out, we actually saw a little earlier on this morning. Netflix was down roughly around $3 to $4 this morning, while the broader market was continuing to rally. That was something that stood out to me. I think Tom actually came on live and actually pointed it out as well because he was actually looking to see what exactly happened with Netflix. There wasn't necessarily a headline that actually stood out to me about this. I know that recently, within the past few days, past few weeks, there were some recent upgrades, and that's why at one point in time, we actually saw some relative strength on Netflix compared to the broader market. But that little breakdown this morning was something that actually caught my attention. But I did highlight Netflix as well yesterday afternoon on our live here. We are in a nice little ascending triangle action, I want to say. You could probably say, I want to say more of a triangle because it's not necessarily a flat top that we have particularly. But just the bigger thing is that you had a nice little rounding bottom action kind of forming here off of this 2 hour, which basically dates back towards the end of September. If I kind of get a little bit of a curve action going on here, you can see that you're basically making a little bit of a curve bottom action here. It's going to be interesting tomorrow to see if we can get a follow through to the upside here on this one. That's what I'm going to be watching for. Bigger key level to see this little rounding bottom action take place and to see a break north would be a break over 245 here tomorrow. So more than likely, potentially, we end up seeing this gap up tomorrow. You want to see this break north to 245 and then confirm breakout above 247. Otherwise, if you're looking for the downside here, if we see more relative weakness like we saw this morning, you're looking for the breakdown here, particularly tomorrow. Look for this to pretty much roll under 236 and then confirm your breakdown under 234. And as you do see, if you're looking for the larger degree move, you would likely be aiming towards a gap fill to the downside here, sitting under 227. All right. So that's one. I'll be interested to see how this ends up playing out tomorrow, just because of the fact that we saw the earlier weakness on earlier this morning. If the market does particularly hold up tomorrow, do we continue to see Netflix hold that weakness that we saw earlier on this morning, or do we see this actually be one of the names in mega cap tech pretty much show us some relative strength going into tomorrow now? Give us a little bit of a flip of the scenario compared to today's price action. All right. So that'll be something I continue to watch as well. Another name, like I mentioned, was Microsoft. We saw the movement out of Microsoft yesterday. This is one that I was pretty big on going into today. We ended up getting a nice little move over that 245 mark, 245 half roughly. We had the nice gap up. So what I ended up doing was that I ended up getting it into a position on this one this morning, and I was particularly looking to pretty much hold above that 245 mark. As long as we held that 245 mark, that's what I was aiming for towards 250, if I remember, that I mentioned on live. And I was able to pretty much get out right around that low 249 mark, was where I was able to pretty much secure all my profits before any kind of morning pullback that we had. So that was a beautiful one that I'm going to continue to watch as well. Again, support level you're watching here going into tomorrow. You can see a little bit of a morning pullback. Watch for that 245, 245 half mark to hold that support. Otherwise, you're flirting with a full-on gap fill below that 245 mark. You're gonna have about a near $4 move to the downside, which will put you right back down towards 240 to completion of gap fill to the downside. Otherwise, again, the other flip side of the scenario here is that you want to take out today's high at that 250 half, and you're going to make your way up towards that 200 EMA, which is also a little bit of a halfway mark of this little descending channel action you see I have going on. That puts you right up towards that 257 level. Okay, so that'll be another one I would like to see if there's any follow through to the upside here on this one tomorrow, and I'll definitely keep an eye on Microsoft on that one. All right. Other than that, those are pretty much some key names that I just wanted to highlight. I know that I went through one of the tickers that you guys just mentioned, the Tesla one. So I believe, other than that, again, I want to see the little morning pullback. If this, in fact, is going to be a little bit of a short term rally that we're going to see in the coming days here. But otherwise, if we end up seeing more than about a 50% retracement of today's price action, that's when you're going to get a little bit more concerned. And we're going to end up deciding tomorrow morning on live whether this is going to be a full-on retracement. We're going to end up giving back this two-day rally that we've had, or do we see a little bit of a halfway mark that we end up finding meaningful support, build a base, and then we could potentially take out today's highs that we had across the board. All right. But other than that, I will leave you guys with that. I appreciate you guys joining as always, and I will conclude today's live with that said. But other than that, you guys all have a great afternoon, and I will